Hi, it is noon on Wednesday, and I'm Janet Fitch. So it must be Writing Wednesday where I answer your writing questions. Uh, Tech questions, philosophical questions, existential questions, uh, craft questions, business, even business side. Happy to answer your questions. And if you have questions in between Writing Wednesdays, which is most of the week, you can write to me through my website, janetfitchwrites.com, and I will be happy to answer your writing questions. So here I am. It's cold day in LA, much turmoil in the country, and we're living through it. And so, Noir, I had a request to talk about Noir, and so that seems like a good thing to do today is to talk about Noir, and that's why I've got my fedora on, as all good noirists should have. Uh, uh, some sort of fedora for all those stakeouts in the rain. Um, so here's my question for the day. It was, um, and feel free as we go along to ask your questions in the comments. I'm always taking questions, so this is for you, and so to get your questions answered. So this is a question from Brenda. And Brenda asks, I'm writing a piece about noir for Substack that she's launching, and for a local newspaper on a film noir series. I've always been fascinated by the genre, but have never tried writing it. And one thing that struck me recently is that you write literary fiction and noir stories. Uh, as the person running the local film series is a New Yorker cartoonist, I'm curious what changes in how you approach writing noir versus writing your novels. Is there a certain frame of mind you need to get into? What elements must you keep in mind that are different from literary fiction? And what attracts you to the genre? Do you like noir stories and noir film? So, Brenda, am I love noir. Um, I feel very attracted to the kind of the secret and seamy sides of life, and I think that when I was a kid, and I always had this fantasy of living over a liquor store and being able to look and see what was happening in the street and who lived up there. And it was very mysterious and very grown up. Um, I think that my noir stories have been. I was asked to do them because I write literary fiction, and the two Akashic, AKASHIC, um, uh, the publisher Akashic Books has a series of noir, city noirs. So they've done, Brooklyn noir, New York noir, and Copenhagen noir, and, Lagos noir. It's like all over. There's like 30, 40 volumes. And I was asked to contribute, me and a number of other LA writers were asked to contribute to Los Angeles noir. And it's geographically based noir. It's where you are is very important in noir. And I'm somebody, if you've read my stuff, where is extremely important to me. I need to have a very clear picture of where things take place and how people travel through space. What's the texture of that city, those streets, that neighborhood. Very important to me as a writer. Anybody who's read my books, there's always a place. And so in writing for LA Noir, I picked the area of town I felt was the most noir, which is a mysterious, it feels like a mysterious neighborhood. It's Las Feliz, and there's a sense of something taking place behind hedges and behind fences, and a really interesting mix of housing and uh, it's hilly, and the houses seem somewhat reserved. They're back from the street, but not in a Beverly Hillsy sort of way, just lock gates. But the whole area seems very mysterious, very tree lined and shadowy. And some of the most famous uh, noir fiction, uh, Double Indemnity, was shot in Las Feliz. It just has that feel. It has the uh, um, Sunset Boulevard-y kind of feel more than Sunset Boulevard does. And okay, so the question is about the difference between literary fiction and my noir stories. So the noir stories are always have been requested of me, would I write? But I have a noir mentality, I think. You could say that, I mean, people had said that White Oleander seemed to be noir. It's daylight noir, which is an LA specialty, where all this sinister stuff is happening in the sunshine with the palm trees and the ocean. Um, as in a lonely place, and Chandler had his base city, which was Santa Monica. Um, it's been a hotbed of noir. Um, but I was approached to do that story, which has just become a feature film, which I guess why Brenda brought it up is that my short story from Los Angeles Noir called The Method was just made into a feature film called The Long Game with Kathleen Turner, and it is out now on all the streaming um, carriers, so you can see for yourself how that turned out. And so there's a couple of aspects of noir. Noir, if you like noir film, if you like noir fiction, um, it is a couple of things will be noticeable. One is it's generally takes a pessimistic point of view about life and humanity. And I waver between my pessimism and my optimism. And so I like writing noir, I think, because it's a place for my pessimism. Hi, Jeff. Good to see you. Hey. Um, it's a place for my pessimism. It's like they say the film, a classic, contemporary noir, modern noir, Chinatown, that there's you know, the detective, the shifty woman in trouble but untrustworthy, the mystery, the corruption, is very much a part of noir. Noir is, the game is rigged, you can't win. But the detective usually in classic noir is sort of a knight, and he's a knight errant. He's a Philip Marlowe, Chandler's detective hero. He's like he's like a knight for the side of good without really believing that good triumphs, but he has to do it anyway. Um, the noir heroes are usually good guys who are well aware of the sewage, they're well aware of the world that they're living in. So it causes often a lot of really, really good dialogue because when you have the good guy who nevertheless knows what he's up against, there's an irony and a sense of dark humor, especially in their way of looking at the world. I know I'm going to lose. I know I'm going to get beat up. I know that, the best I'm going to do is maybe get to the bottom of this. Um, and it is kind of a nightly, with a K, a nightly quest for justice, some kind of justice. But the overall tone of noir is usually that the force of evil does triumph in noir mostly. Hi, we got Sarah and we got um, Brenda. Oh, Brenda, you're here, and Cedric's mom, Diamond Dove, the hat. Yeah, I had to have my noir hat on for this. Um, so Brenda. I'm doing your question about noir. It's like, how do I? Um, the thing that struck her is that I write both literary fiction and noir, and curious and changes how you approach writing noir versus writing my literary fiction. Uh, a certain frame of mind. Yeah, I think it's noir. Noir comes out of the World War II. There was some noir before that, but it's a sense of deep cynicism about the human condition, and it's going to reflect that. It comes out of post-war paranoia. So, every street reverberates with, unseen elements. Um, for me, the difference between writing, oh, so I was talking about Chinatown. It had been written by an American, and there's corruption, there's, a powerful man who has his way with the city, the world. There's corruption all over the place, and the cops kind of like, well, what are you going to expect? But Jake, the knight, has to forge on through and try to discover what's really happening and see if he can right or wrong. Hi, Llewellyn. Uh, very noir, huh? Hi, Listen. Good to see everybody. Um, but when um, Polanski was looking over, I guess, over the screenplay, he was the director, Roman Polanski, and he's a European, and he had lived through the war, um, hiding. I mean, his war was not a cozy armchair one, right? Like many millions of Europeans. And so when he got to the end where Jake, kills the bad guy, saves the woman and her daughter, and they drive off to Mexico together. This is not noir. It's not a noir ending. And Polanski, being a European, said this is not how that story ends. He doesn't have it's a yearning to make the world better, and that doesn't happen in noir. The sadder but wiser ending is the way it goes. And in Chinatown, Polanski rewrote the ending. He said, no, no, that's not how it ends. It ends that the bad guy gets away with it. The woman in danger, if nobody's seen Chinatown, I'm sorry to spoil it for you. Let's just say that he gets away with everything, the bad guy. And the cop and the detective walk away. Um, and it's like, that's the world. It's called, the movie's called Chinatown, and the ending is like, well, that's Chinatown, you know? You live in a corrupt world, and there it is, and here it is again. It's basically the ending of that movie. So if you're hoping for a, nice American happy ending, you're not gonna find it in noir, real noir. And it sometimes happens when a movie is made from a noir movie, when a movie is made from a noir novel or story, uh, because we all kind of, especially Americans, are kind of long for the happier ending that filmmakers sometimes cater to that. And to me, it takes a little bit away from the lingering power. Imagine Chinatown where with a happy ending. It won't linger the same way that the Polanski ending lingered. Um, so Linda, Cedric's mom, read an awesome noir by a female author, Dorothy B. Hughes, and I actually use Dorothy B. Hughes wrote a fabulous noir novel called In a Lonely Place, um, with it's it was made into a movie with Humphrey Bogart and Gloria Graham, who she of the wonderful Overbite. I love that film, and um, there was room in pulps for women, as many genre uh, writing, especially in earlier times, was much more open to whoever could do it. The product was more important than the author. So, there are some very fine female noir writers, and Dorothy B. Hughes is one of them. There's a real pessimism in noir, and so that's the first thing that's a bit different between my literary fiction and my noir fiction. Is my noir fiction is the side of my personality that really thinks that the bad people get away with it. I mean, Oleander was noir in that sense, you know? Justice really wasn't done. The bad person got away with it ultimately. I mean, I remember thinking about what would happen to my characters when I was writing White Oleander. Would the mother be arrested for her crime? And it's like, yeah, she did the crime. She should be arrested for it. But then the corruption, the level of manipulation, and I saw her getting herself exonerated. Although my character triumphed by not having to lie and make that happen. Sometimes just survival is heroic, and I think that's part of what they give you in Chinatown is like you survived it, Jake. Um, and what more can you ask? Um, I think that um, the change of approach in noir. I think that a noir character is slightly more limited than a character in literary fiction, um, because it's going to be more about the plot, and you need a character who will um, serve the plot, who will generate the plot, who is a little more single-minded than a character in literary fiction. And from the beginning somebody's going to die. If there's nobody died, then I don't see it as noir. That's where you start. Who's going to die and how and why? Um, so I won't say it's not character driven. Character driven fiction, literary fiction is a character has their series of characteristics, good and bad, a mix. And then there's a pressure is put on the character by a situation or circumstance. This is the XYZ uh, method of thinking about fiction. Um, Character has all these traits. They're in a situation that puts pressure on them. And some of the traits turn out to be helpful, and some of the traits turn out to be unhelpful. And in generally in character driven fiction, as the character's working it out, they realize what it is that their own weakness, and then they have to address that to accomplish what they intend to accomplish. Whereas noir generally is an exploration of a corrupt world. And you have a protagonist who is in some way often prey in that world. And what they learn is how freaking stupid they were. And, if you think of a book like Double Indemnity, it takes a while for the loser uh, guy who in the movie is played by Fred McMurray. Um, it takes him a while to realize how he's being played. Um, so it's a plot. It's more plot driven, and the characters in noir are will have that cynical streak. Maybe there'll be an innocent in there somewhere, somebody's secretary or something. But it's a game of wise guys and people wising up. I think that's more uh, where what noir is about. Brenda says, so that's why Casablanca is not noir, because of the way the characters change for the better. I think it has noir elements, Casablanca, but I think that it's the optimism of Casablanca ultimately um, moves it into it's more of a straightforward fiction than a noir. Um, Whereas something like the Black Falcon, um, is that right? Um, the shady female, the should know better detective who always is, he's not falling for her, but they're playing this game. I think the Maltese Falcon. Why? How could I not get? Well, how could I not get that? That happens. Um, it's the detective is not living in some dream world. That they're fully aware of who they're dealing with, and I think, if I wanted, if Casablanca was going to be a noir, there were certain elements that um, Rick's incorruptibility would be maybe not so incorruptible if I wanted to make that a real noir. Um, it looks good. I mean, the people who shot those noirs were all Europeans. They came out of um, Czechoslovakia and Germany, and they had seen some stuff, and the black and whiteness, especially the light and dark. It's very contrasty, good noir, and there's a suspense and a kind of a sense of dread that comes just from the starkness of the bright whites against the dark darks, and a lot of diagonals. Just the way they're shot um, is unnerving and disorienting to the and very beautiful, but very stark and very German. It comes out of German expressionism. Um, so by the time the war is going on, a lot of those people have fled and they're in America making films. Um, they The ending is important. Um, I think that one of the what I consider Vertigo a noir. I'm not that familiar with Vertigo. Hitchcock has made some noirs, but he likes a thriller more. Just call it a flat out thriller, maybe. Um, I it's mm, maybe. I think that another thing I do with noir, it brings out the pessimism about people. Uh, One of the constants of noir, especially Chandler, I like Chandler. So, classic noir, Chandler, James M. Cain, Dashiell Hammett. Um, these are the great noirs. And then we have noir in our time, lots of really good noir. Um, I think that a common type of story in noir is where your past catches up to you. That's certainly a constant in Chandler. Um, that you can never leave the past behind. His characters are always people who have come from somewhere else. They've settled usually in Southern California, and they're doing fine. They become quite wealthy, and then something comes out of the past to disrupt that status quo. There is some rot, there's some corruption in that person's life that they thought they could get away from, and it comes back. So that's a one of the great themes of noir. Um, I think one of my favorites is Sunset Boulevard, and I think that Paint It Black, my second novel, was quite influenced uh, by um, that sort of Sunset Boulevard, always the recluse, and then getting sucked into their world. Um, is a theme that always really attracted me, and my story, The Method, is definitely about the glamorous recluse, um, and bad stuff happening. So if you're up for watching The Long Game, you can see some of that. A little different. People always change your when they make a movie out of your novel or out of a short story of yours. It's always going to be different than you wrote it, and you just have to give it up because it's never going to be what you wrote. you know and it can you just have to appreciate that they've made a really good movie and not like dwell on the fact that things have been changed because you already wrote your thing. um I'm very attracted to it. I'm considering whether to write a full length uh noir novel. The story that I wrote in Palm Springs Noir, I was invited to write something about the desert, and, so that story, I'm looking at that as maybe, a short novel in the future. I like a short novel, um, but noir we're talking about out of the past, something happens, somebody comes from out of the past, and that's definitely that story as well. Um, it's a fabulous theme. There's even a wonderful noir film called Out of the Past, one of the great classics. And as an LA person, I love noirs that were actually shot here. So you get Crisscross with um, Yvonne DiCarlo and Burt Lancaster, and it's shot like on Bunker Hill, which is a neighborhood that was leveled to make the music center and the Department of Water and Power. There's a whole city civic center complex in Los Angeles that was built on a leveled Bunker Hill. But at the time, it was one of those noir neighborhoods, very mysterious, all these wonderful, huge, they were original mansions when the city, was starting to become prosperous in the 1880s, 1890s. They built these enormous mansions that eventually the place became kind of run down, and Beverly Hills was much more interesting, Hancock Park. And then they were carved up into boarding houses. When I was a kid, we used to go up and look at those mansions and those boarding houses with all the little mailboxes. And that was the most noir neighborhood. And so there's a movie called Crisscross that was set there. That's wonderful. But I have a very strong affinity to this mysterious side of my city and its noir neighborhoods and the past. And I have not watched. Llewellyn asks, "Have you enjoyed the Lincoln Lawyer series?" I've not watched them, so maybe I should check that out. Uh, yeah, Brenda noted that the Akashic book series is huge. The noir series. There's even a Cape Cod noir. Any place has an underbelly. You know, any place could be a source of crime and cover up and uh, trying to maintain respectability while you're doing some deal or hiding out from something or change your name and think that the past is never going to catch up to you. So in that sense, noir is about justice and can justice be levied or not? Um, does fate come in and have the final blow? Sometimes they do, and it's not in noir. It's not really Deus ex machina. It's more of a sense of fate coming in and righting that wrong. Um, So ask me about noir. Let's see. I have this wonderful book from, I used to be a managing editor of a movie magazine called American Film. And so when they went under, this book fell into my hands. Um, and they call it the American style. Um, it's uh, um it's interesting to read the short synopses of great noir and some crappy noir. I mean, they made so many of them, and you can start seeing some thematic similarities. Um, so Brenda asks, "Are there noir tropes you'd avoid if you wrote a noir novel?" Knowing myself, if I wrote a noir novel, there would be no detective. I mean, classically, it's the cynical detective who gets sucked in and the femme fatale and blah, blah, blah. I'm much more likely, like in my book, uh, in both my noir stories that have been published in Akashic, the Palm Springs noir and the Los Angeles noir, the protagonist is your femme fatale. And it's really their story. So I would tend to do something like that. Uh, Yeah, I would skip the detective, you know? I mean, maybe a detective might be a secondary player. Maybe somebody hires a detective, but it's a the you know, I still would I'm much more a character-driven kind of writer, so I'd be much more likely to pick a different protagonist. And noir tropes I'd avoid if I wrote a noir novel. Um, I'd avoid the murdered woman and, the detective. Um, or the woman in danger and this detective who's going to try to save her. Uh, I don't know that that's how I would play it. Um, other noir tropes I'd avoid. Um, Dark and stormy nights. I like the idea of the daylight noir. Not I don't think dark and stormy nights. I think I've had them a couple of times, but I'm more like fire is probably more the noir season, than the wet streets and all that. Um, so Diamond Dove, I know you. Um, uh, how does one decide if a book falls under the fiction category or more formulaic mystery category? If it has the Meredith, hi Meredith. How does one decide if a book falls under the fiction category or the more formulaic mystery category? If it has noir elements? Well, I think that mystery doesn't have to be formulaic. Um, the most important difference is how plot oriented it is. Mystery in general and noir as sort of a sister category, not completely overlapping, um, is that the character serves the plot, whereas in literary fiction, you've I put pressure on a character and see where it goes. I don't know. However, if I have um, there's not usually in noir mystery, there's an element of crime that is pushes the story over towards mystery and noir. If it's a fiction, if I'm writing fiction and there starts to be crime, blackmail, um, somebody from the past who appears threatening, blackmailing, etc. That's usually popping it right over into the mystery crime category. Um, and I don't see any reason why that can't be as interesting and beautiful and well written as any other kind of fiction. But it tends to be plotted rather than just putting pressure on the character and seeing where they go. Uh, the writer has to have a little bit more control over the plot than in somebody who's like me and just puts characters under pressure and sees where they go. If I was to write a noir novel, I would plot it. Like what has to happen, when, where, and then allow the characters to make that happen. But I don't think I'd just leave it up to chance or up to the characters. So the writer is in a little bit more control of the plot. I'm not a super um, twisty plot type of person. I mean, it's twisty because I'm following a character. So it's like following rabbits, and they do twist. But I think to give a satisfying noir, to get that shape, a satisfying mystery, you really have to know from front to back what's going to be happening. And where are your major twists? And you have characters, your palette of characters is going to be different. Um, I don't wanna see a crime, a noir where, there's too the victim is too whiny, or that we're gonna save the woman or save the teenager from, you know, the clutches of the evil. I don't like that. I kind of like more I'm attracted to Elmore Leonard, where the there's bad guys and then really bad guys, and it's your protagonist is one of the lightweight bad guys, and he's more locked into that world. He can't just decide to go back to Omaha, he's locked in because he too is a criminal and has to be part of that world. Um, uh, yeah, yeah, Meredith says, "I love mysteries, but like the ones with more interesting characters than the thriller plots." Yeah. Um, why is something like here's a thriller. I was watching this show Hijacked. If anybody's looking for a good TV show, Idris Elba. Um, and it's, 6 episodes, something, and it's this guy who is some sort of a security specialist who is on a flight that becomes hijacked, and what he does to um, try to solve the situation. And why isn't that noir? It's thriller, um, but people aren't playing their own, cynical games. Everybody is so earnest. So it doesn't really lend itself to the tough guy, hard-boiled noir uh, kind of story. I think there are more elements of noir in Philip K. Dick in sci-fi than in a lot of crime fiction. And I think it has something to do with a jaundiced view of human nature. And I find I inhabit that from time to time. So my characters, very few of them will be innocents. They'll all have their own ideas about things. It's like the movie that got made, um, The Method, the Long Game, it's called. Um, the protagonist is a pretty cynical person, and she thinks that she's a tough cookie. But when she gets involved in the game of the noir, she realizes, like, she is a lightweight compared to what she's dealing with. And then she has to decide, do I how hardcore do I wanna be? Who am I? Who am I really? Um, that's very interesting. So what's your favorite noirs? Films or films or or books? I'm a great one for Chandler, so I'll always say, "Farewell, My Lovely," The Big Sleep. Um, I like Elroy, you know? Elroy is a mixed people have mixed feelings about Elroy, his, hi it's not just his characters who are cynical. He's got a very jaundiced view of the human being, and, his people can be really crude, can be really racist, can be really, just gobstoppingly awful. But he writes in time period, generally speaking. He's done historical tends to be like the '50s, which are um, a very corrupt time in Los Angeles, especially in the police. Um, and he writes such a great prose. Oh, here we go. So Llewellyn likes The Asphalt Jungle, um, which I believe is Marilyn Monroe is in that. A Touch of Evil, which was shot by Orson Welles. And then we have Strangers on a Train, which is, I believe, Hitchcock, and Dial M for Murder. Oh, those are wonderful. And then you have M, which is German expressionist noir. Um, I would say The Third Man is noir, which is based on, uh, okay, why am I blanking? The Third Man, which is Orson Welles, that was based on a Graham Greene novel. And Graham Greene was somebody who was extremely cynical about the human condition. He was a tortured Catholic, and um, he had been in um, the diplomatic service and was, sometimes the more conflicted morally, internally, a person is, it's not a comfortable thing to be that conflicted. It's not something that you usually want to sign up for, but some of the writers who have that really bring a lot to their work because those inner conflicts are uh, play themselves out in really interesting ways and bring up really um, very pressing issues, moral issues. Brenda says the Highsmith books, the Ripley books, are they noir? Um, they might be. They might be. I know that the TV series of Ripley has a very noir look to it and feel to it, but I don't feel that the stories, the plots of those books are noirish, um, because they're so character driven. Ripley is such a bizarre character. Um, he he admires these people. He wants to be their friends. He panics. He is an imposter, which I just think psychologically, it's a psychological thriller. The person who wants to be thought of differently than they are puts tremendous amount of pressure on themselves. And it's just fascinating to watch the imposter personality at work. And it's dangerous as hell. Um, Elroy seems too in living color to be noir to me. Oh, that's interesting. I think of him as super noir. And I was going to talk about style, the tough guy, the way a noir is written. Um, it often has that ironic tone, a jaundiced view of civilian life. Oh God, Elroy's have that in spades, and a certain, often a really good metaphors are in there. I mean, you'll see that in Chandler, and you'll see it in Elroy. Um, the metaphors are terrific. I know people who think, "Oh, that's flowery. That's for romantic kind of, you know, writing," but it isn't. A good metaphor just stays with you forever. And Chandler is a master. Um, Shadow of a Doubt. I don't think I've read that. Mildred Pierce. Yeah, there's a Mildred Pierce is a James M. Cain, I think. Um, about it's a waitress in Glendale, which is not far from where I live. A very good movie with Joan Crawford. Cry of the Owl by Patricia Highsmith. See, now I'm writing stuff down too. Shadow of a Doubt and Cry of the Owl. Cool. Wait Until Dark. Hmm. Um, my favorite noirs are uh, Out of the Past, um, Crisscross. Um, I like there's a Richard Widmark, film called, Pickup on South Street. He was in a lot of them. There's a wonderful book that I can recommend. I actually pulled it out because I wanted to show it to you, and let's see what I did with it. If you could see my desk, you wouldn't wonder. Um, there's a book by Luc Sante. He's the editor, Lucsante, um, called "Okay, You Mugs." And what he did was he invited a bunch of writers to talk about their favorite um, B movie actors, and many of them are noir. And somebody, I believe, did Widmark, and somebody did. There's a wonderful one on Gene Tierney, who was in Laura, about a murder of a, an incredibly attractive Gene Tierney, and the us kind of finding out what happened and what's going on in her world, um, uh, by a poet named Charles Simic, and that's the best essay in the book. But they talk about Thelma Ritter, who's in a lot of noirs at the time. There's often the wisecracking secretary, the wisecracking assistant, and Thelma Ritter often she plays a working class woman, and um, she's often the maid or the dresser or some sort of petty criminal, and she is wonderful. Eve Arden, sometimes the fast talking secretary, the woman who knows the score. What else do you like? Yeah, my daughter is like the noir nut. Let's see who out of the past. Niagara, we talked about that, and Manchurian Candidate, where the brainwashed war hero, um, Lawrence Harvey, Angela Lansbury, Frank Sinatra is in the noir book right here. That's interesting. Well, so let's see, out of the past. Because I remember that being a particularly good one. Uh, Jacques Tourneur directed. Um, and it is from a novel called Build My Gallows High with Robert Mitchum and Jane Greer, Kirk Douglas. Um, yeah, it's too much to the ill-fated noir protagonist, which is goes everywhere. Touch of Evil was wonderful. That's a corrupt town, border town, where Charlton Heston, of all people, played the Mexican sheriff. But it has, Orson Welles as the great bad guy, and Janet Leigh as the damsel in distress. Um, the recent film Eileen, based on the book by Atessa Moshfegh. I didn't see Eileen. The movie seemed more noir, but it left out so much of the rich character detail that was given for the book. Yeah, well, that's interesting. Yeah, I should see that. Undercurrent, Robert Mitchum. Mitchum was a great noir hero. There's a movie he did with Lillian Gish called The Night of the Hunter. That was really well done. I would not call that a thriller. I'd call it a noir. Um, let's see who we liked. But I'll go for Elroy every day. I love let's talk about Elroy's style. This was very interesting. He has an incredibly punchy style. If you read him out loud, you can hear it. If you ever hear him read, it's well worth going to hear him read, or look on YouTube or see if you can find it. And it's kind of like staccato. It's a very staccato rhythm. It's like uh, machine gun fire or stilettos on a pavement or something. And somebody asked him why, how did he develop this style? And he said that he had submitted a book that was too long. They were told him to take out, cut it down by a 20% or something. And so he took all the verbs out. So there are a lot of sentences that have no verbs at all. And it developed into a style, rather than a limitation, which was very interesting and worth taking a look at. So I'm going to write down in the chat, okay, you mugs, if I can write in the chat. Let's see. Okay, you mugs, by Luc Sante, edited by Luc Sante. Very worth taking a look at. And, Chandler, James M. Cain, Dorothy Hughes, that's a great one. Dashiell Hammett is a little bit earlier than some of these others. He's the Sam Spade writer. He's the Glass Key, the Dane Curse, and he's in San Francisco. So anyway, this is just scratching the surface of noir. But I hope you just think about noir and why is it different, than the average crime novel. And in the meantime, I'm wishing you good reading, and we'll see you next week for Writing Wednesday. Thank you for coming. Okay, bye.